Taoiseach, I noted that those in the Dáil for leaders' questions stood for a pause for peace, and that's a very good thing that people would stand up and call for world peace. When you look at the horrific conflict, not only that is taking place in Ukraine, but Yemen, horrors that we've seen in Syria, many other parts of the world. But I don't really understand how on the one hand we can stand for peace and call for a pause for peace, but there is no sign from our government in what is supposed to be a neutral country of us actually urging peace in terms of the terrifying conflict that is taking place in Ukraine. The despicable character, as you referred to it, of Putin's invasion is beyond question. He's a tyrant, he's a warmonger, he's a bully, and what he's doing is wrong. But that does not mean that escalating and escalating and escalating the war is the solution, because it has reached a terrifying level. I mentioned last week the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, first set up by Einstein in 1945, saying that the clock towards nuclear annihilation is closer than it has ever been since the end of the Second World War. 90 seconds to disaster. And that is where things seem to be going. President Zelensky looking for tanks, then he wants F-16 fighters. Where does it go? So I just ask you, in your conversation or in your view of this, in terms of the war and conflict, are you worried about the possibility of this escalating to a nuclear confrontation, which will be a disaster for everybody? And don't you think Ireland should use its voice to call for de-escalation?
Thanks, deputies, for your questions. First of all, to say I would like to visit Ukraine. I've never had the opportunity to visit that country, and would very much like to visit. I'm connected to it in a way that I never was in the past, given that there's somebody from Ukraine who's been living with me for, well, since May at this stage, and I've come to learn a lot about the country and its culture, and would love to visit, a chance to visit at some point, and particularly would like to be able to visit a Ukraine that's at peace. But if the opportunity arises, I will travel there to show our support and to re-emphasise our solidarity, but no dates have been agreed or discussed at this stage. President Zelensky did make me aware of his 10-point peace plan, which I've had a look at since we spoke. I do think it's very good, but realistically I don't think that is something that Russia would ever agree to. And I think that Ukraine will need to regain more of its territory, if not all of its territory, before the prospect of a ceasefire or peace arises. The way we can achieve peace is for Russia to withdraw from the territories that it's occupied. And I don't think it's something you should be blasé about, Deputy. Calling on somebody to withdraw from occupied territories is something that they should do. In relation to the embassy in Kiev, we do want to get that up and running, have the ambassador there, have it functioning again, and I know there are some issues around security. I don't know the details of all that, but the Taoiseach, I know, is working on it. And I have to say, I absolutely agree that escalation is not a solution. But what is the alternative? To allow Russia free hand to massacre the Ukrainian people, to occupy their capital, to take away their freedoms, their democracy? I know you're not saying that, but it's not that anyone thinks that escalation is a solution. The reason why weapons are being provided to Ukraine is because that if weapons are not provided to Ukraine, it will escalate anyway. Russia will enter the big cities, will do in those big cities, in Kharkiv, in Kyiv, in Zaporizhia, and in Odessa, exactly what it's done in the cities that it has occupied. So it's not a choice of simply saying escalation or de-escalation. Russia will escalate this war anyway. They will kill more civilians. They will commit the most heinous atrocities. And the reason why weapons are being provided to Ukraine is to hold them back. And that's the impossible choice that countries bigger than ours are now making at the moment. But I want to be very clear that we do call for de-escalation. We want Russia to cease fire. We want it to stop its advance. we wanted to stop the missile attacks and the airstrikes on civilian targets, and we wanted to pull back from the territories that it's occupied. And I think that will put us in a different place. And I don't think the Western governments would have to provide additional armaments to Ukraine if that were to happen. And I do think it's important that we never allow anyone to doubt that all of us in this House believe that Russia is the aggressor. And I do know that the deputies opposite aren't supporters of Vladimir Putin or the Russian regime. But I do think it's important in your comments that you don't in any way create the impression that this is somehow a war between equals. This is a big country against a small country. This is an aggressor against a country that has been attacked. And there's a big difference in providing weapons to a country that's defending itself than providing support for a country that is on the attack. And just like you, I don't like to see, in fact, I'm appalled to see the arms industry making money and increasing its profits as a result of what's happening in Ukraine. I'd much rather see that money being spent on reconstruction.